you've got a public service announcement
Yes.
you want to give to everybody that needs to be assessed, and that is CMMC scoping. It really does matter, what is in scope, what is not for your CMMC environment, right?
Absolutely.
And why is that so important, Mike?
I think the scope of your assessment sets the groundwork, right?
Hi, I'm Eric.
I'm Mike.
Welcome
to the
Cyber
Sitrep. There we go.
Yes,
We're getting
finally.
it better.
We had a rough take earlier, guys, so it was good.
It's Friday, and it's beginning to snow outside. And then, it's spring.
In April, typical Colorado weather.
Colorado weather.
We love it.
So what are we talking about today?
Well, Mike, there's something very near and dear to your heart that, you've been sharing is causing you some angst as a C3PAO, and you've got a public service announcement you want to give to everybody that needs to be assessed, and that is CMMC scoping. It really does matter, what is in scope, what is not for your CMMC environment, right?
Absolutely.
And why is that so important, Mike?
I think the scope of your assessment sets the groundwork, right? It's the overarching boundary, what's going to be looked at, what's not going to be looked at. Is it a CUI asset, controlled unclassified information, CUI?
Yeah, he's good.
Got to get in there with those acronyms. It's early. Give me time.
Yeah, I know, right?
But eventually you need to know what is a CUI asset, what is a security protected asset, SPA, what is an out of scope asset, meaning they're not going to look at it. And that starts with the organization seeking certification, the OSC. Mm-hmm. They need to know the scope so that when they go to present it to the 3CPO, ourselves, that are going to do the assessment, and then we have to come to an agreement that they match.
Yeah, and that's key for everybody to remember, right? They have to match, because if there's discrepancies and you guys determine as a C3PO that they're not where they need to be, then that goes on their permanent record, does it not?
It does.
Yeah.
So we do 4 phases in an assessment, and phase 1 is, did you answer the questions, and is the scope what you think it is?
Right.
So typically we'll do a scoping call, and if you're like, I've got Bob and Jim and Sue, and they're in scope, and everybody else is out of scope, and then we get to your network, and it's a flat network, like everybody is connected to everybody.
Everybody's in play, right?
Right.
So,
It's determining that scope, which is important. So what a scope is where your CUI boundary is, both internally and externally. So it's finding out where and what systems may be able to see, or what we like to say can. We're going to get into that a little bit later.
The word can, very
can
important.
Is very important, and we're not talking about a can of soda, which I prefer. It is the what
beer
is
in my case,
scope.
But okay.
Well, yeah. So,
sorry.
No, I'm with you. Now
later.
I just went,
I know.
beer. I did a homer. It's like,
you did. That
beer.
That was like subconscious too. That was awesome.
You saw it live.
That was unbidden.
Going, So why scoping is important, as well as it can save you money, because if you can remove things from scope and literally take them out of the audit or the assessment, then that will save you time, energy, money when it comes time for that assessment. Because if you can label something out of scope, we're not looking at it.
Well, and Mike, because I respond well to physical violence, I like to use the analogy, it's less rocks to be thrown at you.
Exactly.
Right? If you give the assessor less rocks they can pick up, it's less that they can throw at your head, right? So, where you can reduce that scope, you should.
Right. And an example of this would be if someone's using a virtual desktop or a virtual PC, or now we're seeing more cloud PCs in, like, say, a Microsoft environment. If it's configured correctly, your host system isn't in scope.
Right.
But
exactly.
if you have it misconfigured and that comes out later, well, then your host system's in scope. Oh, that means it's on your network. Your network's in scope. And I like to say there isn't necessarily scope creep in an assessment.
Right.
Scope creep means assessment ends.
Yes. Yeah.
And we have to come back and reassess scope. Small changes we can get, like, I forgot to include Jim's computer, but it's a carbon copy of every other computer on the network.
That's not a deal breaker or showstopper, right?
I have a virtual desktop that limits my scope to this virtual machine on my PC, and you're like, yeah, can you copy and paste? Well, yeah.
Oops.
Oh, sorry.
Right, because that CUI can be copied between that virtual desktop and your physical system. So ergo, it's in scope, right?
Yeah.
And it's so funny you brought up that specific example, Mike, because seriously, earlier this week, I was on a call with one of our customers on the consulting side of this, on the implementation side, and that very question came up. And to their credit, they were going the opposite route of trying to include everything in scope because they weren't sure.
Right.
And we were able to talk them off the ledge and get them, to reduce that scope because they were doing all that stuff. They were just trying to be extra cautious and secure. And once we talked about the CAN principle there, then we were able to verify that they have it implemented correctly and on budget, and there's nothing additional they need to do. So that was a very, very good call for us. And it's just crazy.
And we'll save them money in the long run.
Yes, absolutely.
So my example there is we work with a lot of manufacturing companies, and you could have 300 employees with 300 email accounts. But are they all touching CUI?
Right.
If not, maybe you need to set up a separate domain or what we would call an enclave, separate it out, that you can logically and possibly even better physically separate out, so that way the 20 people in the manufacturing company that actually see and deal with CUI are the ones within your scope.
Exactly.
And that's what's being assessed. Because you really don't want Jim on the floor who has never seen CUI in his life getting asked by an assessor, so how are you protecting CUI? And they're like, God bless you.
Exactly. And that's the other piece of the puzzle, right, is if it's in scope, then they can be interviewed, and they will be interviewed.
Exactly.
And if they can't spell CUI, now you're going to have a bad time. So once again, you trying to be proactive and make everybody covered does not serve your interest at the end of the game, right?
And it saves money not only on your assessment,
absolutely.
But if you don't need the higher licensing requirements for, say, like with Microsoft or using a Prevail or another system, you don't need 300 people on this high-tier, super
adds
secure.
Up, right? I mean, once again, you guys can look this up yourself, but the difference that I've seen out there between, and I'm not beating up Microsoft because Google's the same way, but the difference between Business Premium and the Government Community Cloud, which is the absolute minimum for CUI protection, is double. At least. And then if you go to the high version, GCC High, which if you have any ITAR or export arms regulation, ITAR, international traffic and arms regulation, if you have any of that data, you're automatically going to have to go GCC High. And that's triple or more per user. So to your point, if you have 10 people you have to do it for, that's a painful day. But if you have to do it for 300, oh my gosh, are you going to be able to afford that from a CapEx,
Exactly. And then that rolls right out into the training, because now they all have to be trained in CUI handling. They all have to get the cyber awareness training. They all have to, it just goes and goes and goes. And then you get to the assessor. But converse on that is if everyone does deal in CUI, and you're like, it's really just the 30 in the main office that deal with it mostly. I heard those terms, mostly, and I'm like, mostly is not a good assessment term.
No, as assessors, they don't like
often. That. How often do you use your printer for CUI? Not frequently.
Yeah, very rarely.
So it's out of scope, right?
No, because the fact you use it at all. Right?
Exactly. So that's the scoping. It's really sitting down and having an honest conversation with yourselves to say, where is our CUI, where is our CUI, where can it go, what systems may it touch, can it touch, and then you have to categorize it correctly. We were talking a little bit beforehand about security cameras. So outside security cameras that are just watching your building or maybe watching your door would be called a security protection asset, or an SPA.
Right.
And they're in scope, but treated as an SPA, meaning they will not hold, control, transmit CUI.
Right.
But if you have one on your manufacturing floor, say, watching all your pieces be built
that are CUI components,
now not only is that a CUI asset, as well as an SPA, but also, where is that being stored? Is it recording to the cloud?
Yes, exactly.
If it's recording to the cloud, we run into the cloud
moderate
is in scope, and it needs to be FedRAMP moderate.
Yeah, this could get really hairy really quick, Mike, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, so the idea of scoping being like, we'll figure it out when it comes time for our assessment is way, way, way too late.
Right. So on that note, if this is complete gibberish to everybody, there are some scoping guides out there, right?
That's right.
Free resources on the Office of Secretary of Defense under CMMC. If you look for CMMC Level 1 scoping guide, they have a Level 2 scoping guide and Level 3 scoping guide. Start with those, see if you can make sense of what's in that documentation. And then if not, then reach out to companies like ourselves or anybody else that's in the community that knows how to speak this language. We can help talk you off the ledge here, right?
Because it is another language.
It totally is. We
start throwing out
that.
CUI, SPA, what is the contractor managed asset? There's other acronyms that just go.
Right. There's like an acronym sheet, 3 pages long. We kid you not, right?
Right.
So, but Mike, to your original point, you've hit this multiple times now, and it seems to be a trend. So you're just trying to get the word out there, right?
Exactly.
That scoping is critical for your organization because you've had some no-goes already, right?
Right, and that's kind of the issue is when you go in to find your assessor and we start to do the first scoping call with you and we want to get into phase one. And again, once you're in phase one, you're in the assessment. So that means a negative outcome still gets uploaded into the federal system, EMAS, that then...
Which is my statement on the permanent record, right? Because there's
like being in high school again. It's going to be on your permanent record.
Right. So if you're not quite ready for that, then please go on the RPO, the Registered Provider Organization side, or equivalents, which we're an equivalent to that, on the pre-assessment side to help you guys figure out what's in scope. Because by the time you get the C3PAO involved, because of their ethical and legal requirements, they can't work both sides of the aisle for you, right?
That's right. We can't tell you like, oh, you're out of, what we would say is we believe these things are in scope and we can't necessarily assess you not including those.
Right.
You might find another C3PO who sees it your way.
It's possible.
That's kind of going to be rare in the sense of the scoping guide is there.
Right.
And it goes back to that can. You're going to have a pretty good argument that, CUI cannot. There is an impossibility of CUI on this machine.
So, Mike, let's go back to the first part. Stage one, you said scoping. What happens when you determine that the organization seeking certification, the OSC, just isn't there yet? So you've got to market an EMAS, they're not ready. What does that then look like for a follow-up? And, how long will it take them to get back in queue, et cetera, et cetera? What does that look like?
So we are booking up fast and furious now as 3CPOs. And if you miss out on phase one, meaning we don't go to phase two, you have to get back in line, if you will.
And you don't get to jump the line, do you?
No, we would do what we can to see if we have openings and try to get you in as soon as possible. But there's no guarantee that we can say, oh, don't worry, see us in 3 months and we're great.
Right.
And sadly as well, we have a billing structure, and almost all 3CPOs are doing this, that you have to pay for phase one and then you pay separately for the other phases. And we're doing that because we're finding companies are not making it past phase one.
Gotcha.
But we do have a level of effort to go through all those documents.
Quite a lot, actually, right? It's pretty intense.
It is.
From what you've told me.
So there's that phase one bill. And we would hate to see you get to the end of phase one and we're
wants to see that.
Sorry, we can't move forward.
Yeah.
And sadly, we know there are companies out there that aren't really trying to help like this and give the advice. They're just like, sorry, you missed it. Hit us up in 6 months.
Thanks for your money, and we'll see you again, right?
Because there's always,
well, there always, right? There's always a few bad eggs in every batch. But, so I think the key takeaway there is measure twice, cut once. Right? What a concept, right? So if you're not sure, then don't sign up. Don't get into the queue yet, right?
Right.
Reach out to somebody that can help you, give you a honest assessment of where you're at with that, so that way you maximize your chances of success, right?
Exactly. And, get that help first.
Yes.
I mean, we can do something that's like a mock or pre-assessment, if you will. I say pre because it's not
from
level
the assessment side.
From the assessment side. We can't help you with any, this is what you need to do. But as far as scoping goes, a scoping conversation is a part of an assessment.
Yes.
So, for a nominal fee, we can do that up front before you even ask for the phase one. And we've had some companies take that option where they're like, let's pretend we're doing the assessment for real, but we're not.
We're not.
We're not into phase one, which means you won't go on your permanent record.
Nothing in EMAS, nothing to see here, move on.
Exactly.
Right?
And this part of it, the scoping part, is something we can't say help, but it's something we have to do. We have to scope.
Right.
So, of course, we would sit down and say, this is what we think the scope is and why. And if you disagreed, again, we're not into an actual assessment. So this is where we could think about and talk through the can it Can't it?
Right.
Maybe Jim in accounting is out of scope. Maybe Jim in accounting is in scope because he will see CUI possibly once a year. You know?
Right. But if it's possible, then it is technically in scope.
Then
right?
it's in scope. So we could do that as that pre-assessment and try to walk you through it.
Excellent, excellent. So everybody, please take advantage of that. And then if you don't mind closing on your last point, the CAN, right? This is kind of your rule of thumb. If you don't remember anything else that Mike's telling you here is remember the word CAN.
Right. So the whole idea of your assessment scope essentially rotates around, will CUI be able to be processed, transmitted, or stored?
Three
Remember
parts.
those things, processed, transmitted, or stored. If your computer, your phone, your camera can
anything
do that. So going back to a camera, people are like, well, it can't process. It maybe stores on the camera. But if it can, meaning you're watching and recording CUI being made, then it can. Matter of fact, it is.
Exactly.
So, and if you say, well, we don't always do our CUI on this part of the floor, it's typically not.
Right.
Can it possibly do it? And if you're like, well, once every third quarter under a blue moon, we do CUI out there.
I love it.
Then you answered the question. Yes, it can.
Exactly.
So I don't know that slogan sounds familiar to me. Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
And that's what you have to think about with CUI is, can it do it?
Right.
So the other things, your routers, your switches, your hubs, can they transmit CUI? Well, if they can, they're in scope. If they're been segmented off and they can't, they're out of scope. Now, being in scope doesn't mean that you have to throw on every 110 control. It depends on what kind of device it is and what it's doing for you.
And if the traffic's already encrypted, et cetera, right? Things
Exactly.
like that.
Exactly.
Once again, that's one of those finer points, but start with the CAN, right?
Right, because it's in scope.
Absolutely.
You don't say it's out of scope. You would say that router is in scope. Because it can transmit this stuff.
Can be, right.
But does it need a logon banner?
Right.
Probably not, because it's not going to transmit and store open CUI data.
Exactly.
But it can.
Right.
So therefore,
and all these are nuances, so please take advantage of that pre-assessment, regardless of who you use.
Yeah.
Right. Arguably somebody reputable, they can help you get those nuances explained, because not everything is black and white. Some things are, but not everything, right? There's nuance changes a day. Like, I can't tell you, to your point, the camera example, why we use that is we've had multiple customers argue with us about that.
Right.
Saying, well, no, because it doesn't store, transmit, or, process CUI, but it's looking at something that is CUI. So, yes, it is. Because
I have a camera behind me looking at my computer screen.
It's the same effect, right? It is the same effect. And so you got to look at the nuance, you got to look at the context of the situation to evaluate that properly in your environment.
And that happened during our assessment. I have a security camera in my office, and I had to show
you did
that it was not looking, it was in an angle that could see me, it could watch who was in the office, it was for security,
right?
But had no view of CUI.
And it was really funny because they were trying to catch them.
Oh, they were.
They were like, oh, this is an easy one. We're going to catch them on this one.
I'm like, I'm waving, going, see, you can see me on the camera. You cannot see my computer top.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's all about the CAN. And, kind of to recap, we are really just trying to help you say, you can, one, save money if you can limit your scope. But you need to make sure that in that limiting of the scope, it's an actual limit, that you do have physical and logical controls in place that can make you say can't when it comes to that CUI transfer.
Not sometimes, not maybe, but can't.
Not once in a lifetime. It may happen.
Absolutely, right. No, that's a great point. So, all right, well, I think you recapped everything. Once again, reach out.
Have we beaten the the point?
I think we have. But it's needed, right? I mean, we laugh at this, but you're seeing it real time, and you're trying to help people, save a lot of pain and angst and money by getting in front of this and coming properly prepared.
Exactly, because like you say, we've seen it.
Yeah,
we just see it
we
again
continue
and again.
to see it, right?
Yep.
And we continue to fight it on our end, on the other side, trying to convince people what their scope is based on what we know.
Yep.
And it is a challenge. So
it is, and you want it out of scope if possible.
Right.
I like to say CUI is cooties. The few people that have it, the better.
Exactly. I love it. I love all the.
You have to.
All the analogies are awesome.
So it's like high school and kindergarten, and wherever we are again, you just have to make sure that it's as limited as possible, but you can defend it. That's the big thing. If you come up with your scope and this is my scope,
right,
defend it.
Yes, exactly. Because, the assessor doesn't always win on that, right? You can convince assessors if you have a valid argument. You can persuade assessors. They're human, just like the rest of us, right? So
you could have a policy going back to that camera.
Yeah,
the once in a lifetime that they're going to run the manufacturing floor with CUI, and they're like, so we have a policy in place that we drape.
Yes, or turn the camera off,
or turn the camera off, and it's right here in our written policy, and we have a procedure to do that.
Smart.
Now it's out of scope, right? Because you've shown that you are making sure it's out of scope.
And there's a lot of ways we can do that for a lot of other controls. So once again, we're here to help. Please reach out.
Yep.
And with that, you guys have a great day.
We'll talk to you soon. See you soon.
Take care.
Hey, remember to like and follow us here on our podcast and YouTube channel. And we are coming to you from the Studio 809 Community Podcast Studio at the Next Us, which is a professional cooperative environment for small businesses here in downtown Colorado Springs. You should check them out.
Come check it out. I'll tone it down a little bit. I am a little hyper.
No, I'm hyper. I don't mind being hyper. I just came in. Hi, I'm like, oh!
Well, we're going to say welcome.